Hi guys, welcome back to the Mina Does Art Stuff YouTube channel. My name is Mina and on this channel we do art stuff. Today we are looking at some more earth browns in our colour comparison series. I am almost finished with filming this first set of videos. I might look at doing some more once these videos have been released, so let me know in the comments below if there are any other pigments you'd like to see me do a comparison on, and if I have enough of them in my collection to make a worthy comparison video, then I will go ahead and do that as well. So first up today we are looking at I have some umbers, so raw umber, natural umbers, then we have a couple of Mars browns, another umber which I forgot so added on the end, then we have burnt umbers and more burnt umbers, and lunar earth and Aquarius brown are kind of together off in the bottom here. Right, so starting with core raw umber. Ooh. Okay, so that's just up here. I think this one's actually, the official name is raw umber natural, but either way it's a raw umber, PBR 7. I'm not a huge fan of raw umbers. I prefer warmer browns, but I actually don't mind the core raw umber. Not my favourite, but it's on my palette so I'll use it, kind of thing. I wouldn't go out of my way to buy this one again, let's just put it that way. But since I have it, I shall use it. That's kind of my feelings on this colour. Then we have a couple of colours from Roma Schmincke here, so I will do all of those together. I have my natural umber reddish. Which is interesting because this reads more like a burnt umber than a natural umber. But there again, it is a reddish, so. This is PBR 7. Again, umber, raw umber, burnt umber, all of these tend to be a PBR 7 pigment. And then down here I have Cyprus burnt umber. You can see it's very similar to that natural umber reddish, at least while they're wet. We'll see when they dry. And the other one I have is Aquarius brown, which this is a heavily granulating earth pigment. It's PBK 11. Then we have white nights. I have a couple of white nights to swatch as well. I have 3 for this one. So we have umber, and this was my first experience with like a raw umber type colour, was in this palette, was this one, and it's just, again, it's a bit greenish leaning. PBR 7 again, and it's just a bit, I don't know, I have no use for a colour like this. I don't really know what I would use it for. I don't think I've really used it for anything. It's just not my cup of tea, unfortunately. Then I have Mars Brown by White Nights. This is PBR 6. Not a bad colour. I don't know, I just find these sort of brown earth tones from White Nights are just a little bit on the weak side. I do like the White Nights burnt umber. This one I've used it so much I bought a tube, and it's this, so this is refilled from the tube. And with White Nights, their tube paints never completely dry out because they're honey based. I don't know if their pan paints have a different formula or not, but their tube paints, when you pour them into pans, they stay very sticky for a long time. But that's a nice burnt umber. I do like that one. I have Schmincke's Mars Brown. For some reason this is not in my Schmincke palette, so I'm just going to squeeze a little bit out onto paper. It's PBR6, same as the White Nights version. This one's a little bit more red leaning. And we have some Paul Rubens colours. I have a couple from Paul Rubens to include here. So we have Umber, which is here. This is PR 101 and PY 41. And if you saw my burnt sienna video, you'll know that I kind of think they got the names mixed up. They have one called burnt sienna, which in my mind looks more like a burnt umber, and this one they've called umber, and this looks very much more like a burnt sienna to me. It does not look like an umber. Alright, and then they have one here called burnt brown, PBR 7. This one almost looks more like a raw umber. We have Da Vinci's burnt umber. Down here. This is also PBR 7. I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record now with how many times I'm saying PBR 7, but you get my drift. This is a nice burnt umber. I don't know, this might be a controversial opinion, but I kind of prefer, I know it's really popular for people to mix burnt sienna with ultramarine to get a nice grey. I kind of prefer burnt umber and ultramarine to make a grey, to be perfectly honest. But maybe I'm the odd one out. Let me know if you have a preference. Oh, I just realised I made a mistake. I put the White Nights burnt umber here, but that's going to be Winsor & Newton. Alright, I'll just make that correction. White Nights, and that's just PBR 7. And this one will be Winsor & Newton PBR 7. 101. Yeah, don't ask me why Winsor & Newton's burnt umber has 3 pigments. I don't know. I do quite like that burnt umber, but it's a really odd one. It dries and shrinks and shrivels up. So I'm going to let that soak a little bit before we dip into it. We'll do Holbein's burnt umber. That's also just PBR 7. This one's a bit brighter, a bit more on the burnt sienna side, a little bit more red leaning. Winsor & Newton one now. Sorry, I'm kind of jumping around today with these swatches. I've lined them up in a way that makes sense when we compare them together, hopefully. But it just means that if I've got a colour from, you know, more than one colour from one palette, that they're not necessarily going next to each other on the swatch sheet. So, jumping around a little bit from one side to another. I'm going to do the Michael Harding one next, because I have two from the Daniel Smith. So this one is the Earth of Cyprus PBR 7. And finally, I have two from Daniel Smith. I have Burnt Umber and Lunar Earth. Where's Burnt Umber? I think that's the one. Burnt Umber is PBR 7. Okay, and then Lunar Earth is the last one. This is also PBR 11, same as the Aquarius Brown. You can really see all that granulation coming up on there. This one's also heavily granulating. Alright, so that's all of those colours swatched out. I'm going to set this aside to dry and we'll come back and look at these when they're dry. Back with the burnt umbers and Mars browns and umbers in general type of colours. Sorry, this paper's warped a bit while it was drying. So starting at the top here, we have raw umber / natural umbers and a couple of Mars browns. So I'm not really a fan of raw umber type colours. My first experience with a raw umber was this one, which is, in my opinion, not a pretty colour at all. Then I've played around with the core raw umber. Not as bad. It's quite good as like a dark for mixing, but not one I would use on its own. Also not one I would purchase again. It came as part of the Earth set, or the earthy colours set. Core has these smaller sets of 6 5mm tubes in different colour sets. So they have a high chroma set, earthy set, and then I think they have like a basics set as well, which is a very affordable introduction to core paints. So that one came in that set for me. They're again not one I would go out and buy again. The Roma Schmall Natural Umber Reddish, I really like this one. That one was a surprise for me that I liked. This one, no. And then we've got two versions of Mars Brown. We've got Schmincke's Mars Brown and then White Knight's Mars Brown. White Knight's one's obviously a lot darker, a little bit cooler. Schmincke's one has some really nice granulation and is much warmer. And then I have this Paul Rubens Umber, which is very weak, was hard to get the pigment off of. I just don't like it. To be fair, whilst I don't mind some of the colours in this top row, specifically Roma Schmall's Natural Umber Reddish and Schmincke's Mars Brown, I don't think I would purchase any of these again. Or I don't think I would go out of my way to purchase these paints. Most of these that I have came as part of sets. The only one I purchased like specifically was the Roman Schmall one. All the others came as part of a set of colours. It wasn't one I picked out, as it were. So then coming down to the burnt umbers. Da Vinci's burnt umber, like it. White Knight's burnt umber, I do really like it, but not one I would purchase again, just because the formulation of White Knight's paints doesn't really set at all. It's almost worse than Sennelier's. Sennelier paints have a reputation for not setting, and they stay tacky, but nowhere near as bad as the White Knights, in my opinion. From my experience, the White Knight paints from tubes are always gooey. They never set completely, whereas with Sennelier, most of them do eventually set. Again, for me at least. Paul Rubens burnt brown, again, I don't like it at all. I don't like these cooler leaning browns, or if they're going to be like this, I prefer it to be more like a sepia colour or something along the lines of this, where it's going to make a good mixer. Holbein's burnt umber is really pretty as well. Daniel Smith's burnt umber is nice and rich. Roman Schmall's Cypress burnt umber is surprisingly not that nice compared to some of the others. I will use it if I am using my Roman Schmall palette and I don't have another sort of dark brown available, I will go for it. But I find it's very similar to the Natural Umber Reddish. I don't think these two are that different. I feel like you only really need one on your palette, and between the two, I probably would go for the Cypress burnt umber. It's slightly warmer leaning. I really like the Michael Harding Earth of Cypress. That's really nice, get nice darkness in the mass tone. Winsor & Newton's burnt umber, I love the colour. I hate the formulation of this paint. It dries really hard like a rock. It shrivels up in the palette. It's really hard to re-wet and get a lot of saturation out of. I was working on this one a lot in the video. I don't know if I cut some of that out, but it took a while to get some decent colour saturation out of it. It just wasn't fun to use. And then finally, the last two we have here is Daniel Smith's Lunar Earth and Roman Schmall Aquarius Brown. Both of these are PBR11, sorry, highly granulating earth colours. I'm going to say tick to both of these because at the moment Roman Schmall's only available in pans. So if I want this in a tube, Daniel Smith's is the only one really to look that's available in a tube. I don't know of any other brand that offers this pigment. It's beautiful, heavy granulation, and this creates some really fun mixes with other colours. Some really unexpected granulation. I really actually liked the neutral colour you get when you mix Lunar Earth or either one of these with lavender. It makes some really interesting neutrals with some really heavy granulation. It's a very interesting one. Oh, and the other thing I don't like about the Winsor & Newton burnt umber is the fact that it's got 3 pigments, and I feel like that's a bit unnecessary for a burnt umber, which is typically just PBR7. Pretty much every other version of burnt umber is just 1 pigment, so why this one had to be 3, I don't really understand. And I don't have a problem with multi-pigmented colours, I really don't. I just, when it doesn't work very well, when the formulation of the paint is so like hard to work with, I don't understand why they make it more complicated than it needs to be. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye!